Firstly, let's talk about risk. Risk by definition is a situation involving exposure to danger or to expose someone or something valued to danger, harm or loss. Though I much prefer to look at risk in relation to uncertainty, an uncertain event or condition that, if it does occur, can present a positive or negative effect on a project. When looking at Plutchik's model of emotions and thinking of a time where I took risks, I think back to a few years ago where I wanted to capture intimacy on camera. So I contacted 2 trusted videographers and asked them to video me having sex for my first video clip, Waterplane. At the time, I worked at a private elite boys' school with not a perfect history when it comes to sexual scandals. So the idea of doing something relating to sex whilst being in the education industry felt very risky to me, which brings me to say, risk is relative. For me, being a teacher that works with children and having a tuition studio company that works in schools and practically doing a sex tape felt immensely risky to me. Turns out it was fine. The end product is very PG, and it made me realise that as educators, we have a duty not to shy away from the most basic of human emotions. And if we portray them in our art, that we have a healthy level of awareness of our audience and to be conscious about the way that the end product is delivered. In many ways, being in the education space holds the adult Bron back a little bit, as I need to constantly be aware that anything I can produce can fall in the hands of students and children. Looking back, it's one of the most exhilarating things that I've ever done. And since then, I haven't met many people in the circles that I associate with that would be willing to try such a thing. This being said, risk is relative. What is risky for me may not be so risky for someone else, and risk is always linked to vulnerability and humility. Looking at Banksy this week, shredding £1 million artwork, he is pushing the limits of creativity and redefining art as we know it. It is hard to find ways to innovate and create something completely new, and I take my hat off to him for being, experimental, without certainty of how the audience, or the new buyer for that matter, of the art would react. I love it. I recently saw a performance from Yoko Ono where she practically has some sort of orgasm on stage with a saxophone player. I love this kind of stuff. Many people are confused by it, but I'm inspired by it. Go on, I dare you to try what Yoko Ono did. Put on some saxophone music and make a series of grunting noises. It's really quite therapeutic. Sarah Kaufman states that we are drawn to vulnerability. Psychologists call it the pratfall effect, which means that when you fall and when you stumble, you slip on a banana peel, you make a fool of yourself. That can be the moment that most moves people. You don't want to be considered a failure or to have a string of failures, but we can appreciate seeing someone strive and taking a leap of faith. So, how is risk related to experimentation? If I cast my mind back to science at school, which I was pretty hopeless at, my teacher, Mrs. Barker, will tell you, and you didn't experiment with a test tube and some weird boiling water and Bunsen burner, there was always a format to the experimental process. If I remember correctly, there was a purpose, the formulation of a question, a hypothesis, predictions, testing, and then an analysis. Now, whilst experimentation in art is not a school experiment, we can certainly use some of this framework to push ourselves to find something new. Experimentation is a fundamental part of innovation and creating something new. And some would argue that there's no innovation without experimentation. My current project, World Volume 1, where I record authentic sounds from various places in the world to use in composition, is the perfect project to experiment with. So the purpose of my experiment is to take sounds from ordinary things and make music from them. I'll give you an example. This is the sound of a New York subway. As the train comes in, you can hear it squeal. Now, the first squeal is approximately a B flat, and the second squeal is approximately an E flat, and the last squeal is approximately an F. So if we take these 3 notes, B flat, E flat, and F, I want to experiment by starting my New York composition with the sounds of New York. Similarly with rhythm, this sound is the sound of cars going over the Brooklyn Bridge. Or this sound is from an escalator. My experiment is to use these native, untouched rhythms that we see every day and experience every day to further develop a repetitive rhythm in music. So is this innovative? Is this new? Shit no. A quick Google search will show you that people have been recording soundscapes and cities and compositions for years. Take the Swedish Sonic City project, for example, where three smart people, Lalja Gay, Ramia Mays and Lars Holmqvist, they've developed a system that enables users to create electronic music in real time by walking through and interacting with the urban environment. They explore the use of public space and everyday behaviours for creative purposes. In particular, the city is an interface for electronic music making. The system produces music by retrieving information about context and user action and mapping it into real-time processing of urban sounds. Sounds pretty cool and techie, hey? What I like about their paper is that if you look into sound design space, like my previous example where I explored both ambient sounds as well as rhythmical sounds, I use these random sounds to move from the randomness to determination. I use the sounds from the environment to end up for a user. So my experimentation is to try and build a song from authentic random sounds and develop them into a more structured composition. Create order from chaos, which then in turn will create musical composition that can move users from order back to chaos. It could be said that I'm using the little c, finding creativity in everyday creative actions that we do, to gather information and data and knowledge and turn that, hopefully, if I'm lucky, into a big C, creative contributions and creative originality that change the world. So whilst it's all been done before, I am unsure if my approach has been experimented with. And there we have it, something shiny and something new.